The story begins with silence, not the kind of silence that follows a storm, nor the gentle hush of midnight. This was the silence of absence, so heavy, so unnatural, that even the crows refused to land. Where once there had been laughter, hammers striking iron, children chasing hens through narrow dirt lanes, there was now only emptiness. A village, a living place, had seemingly vanished overnight, leaving behind only hollow homes and a well that smelled faintly of iron as though touched by blood. What happened here? Who or what could strip away an entire community in a single night? To understand this strange disappearance, we must step back into the world of the 14th century, to a time when Europe was a patchwork of fiefdoms, castles, and fragile villages. Life was hard yet familiar. Thatched cottages lined with smoke-stained timbers, narrow tracks of muddy earth connecting clusters of huts, and fields stretching into the distance where peasants bent under the weight of labor. These villages were the beating heart of medieval society, supplying grain, wool, and livestock to the great lords in their stone fortresses. Each hamlet was bound together by ritual and routine: church bells at dawn, market days alive with chatter, and evenings spent in the dim glow of hearth fires. They were fragile but enduring, like sparks flickering in a vast, dark forest. The village in question, though its name has been lost to centuries of rumor, stood in what is now northern Germany, a land of dense woodlands and wide rivers. Chroniclers claimed it was prosperous enough to draw the envy of neighboring lords, yet isolated enough that news traveled there only by wandering monks or merchants trudging along trade routes. At night, the villagers gathered in their timber-framed hall, telling stories of saints and demons, while wolves howled in the forest beyond. Nothing about it suggested that one evening would be its last. And yet, according to records from a nearby monastery, that is precisely what happened. A traveler, arriving at dawn to deliver cloth and salt, found the village eerily deserted. Doors swung open on rusted hinges. Pots of stew, half-cooked, still rested over smoldering fires. Chickens clucked aimlessly in the dirt lanes, as if confused that their masters had vanished. Even the cattle lowed from their pens, thirsty and unfed. But of the villagers themselves, men, women, children, there was not a single trace. No bodies, no blood, no signs of flight. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Stories spread quickly, whispered in taverns and churches alike. Some swore they saw strange lights in the sky that night, flickering like torches above the forest. Others claimed the ground trembled, as though the devil himself had walked upon it. A monk wrote of a thick fog rolling in at sunset, a fog so dense that even lanterns glowed weakly inside it. When the mist lifted by morning, so too had the villagers. Superstition, faith, and fear fed the rumors, each explanation more terrifying than the last. One tale insisted that the villagers had been punished by God for heresy. The chronicles note that a traveling priest had visited only weeks before, accusing the hamlet of pagan practices, rituals held at an ancient oak where offerings of bread and milk were left for spirits of the wood. Could it be that divine wrath had struck in the form of plague or fire unseen? Yet no bodies were ever found, no disease recorded in surrounding towns. The silence of that absence spoke louder than any sermon. Another rumor pointed to earthly enemies. Bandits roamed the forests, some said preying on lonely settlements. Perhaps they came in the night, swords flashing, dragging the villagers into slavery or slaughter. Yet no ashes marked the cottages, no graves or mass pits were unearthed. The possessions of the peasants, tools, clothing, even coins, remained untouched, waiting in houses that seemed abandoned only hours before. Bandits did not leave wealth behind. They took everything. This, too, failed to explain. There were those who whispered of darker forces still. The forest was said to be haunted, home to spirits that lured the living away. Shepherds had long told of voices in the night, calling their names from the tree line. Some swore that once you stepped too far into the woods, you never returned. Was it possible, they wondered, that the entire village had followed a phantom call, walking together into the forest shadow, never to emerge again? The idea chilled even the most skeptical. It suggested not just disappearance, but enchantment. And yet the well at the village's center remained the most puzzling clue of all. The traveler who first discovered the scene wrote in his journal that the water shimmered strangely in the morning light, reflecting not the sky, but something dark beneath. When he drew up a bucket, the liquid reeked of metal, staining his hands red. He fled in terror, abandoning his cart, swearing that he heard something move at the bottom of the well, something shifting, something alive. To this day, no one knows what truly became of that medieval village. Some historians dismiss the tale as exaggeration, a legend born from famine or migration. Yet the monastery's record is there, brittle ink on parchment. In the year of our Lord, 1349, the village of was found empty, its people vanished, its silence profound. For those who cherish the hidden corners of the past, the mystery endures. How could a community of families, farmers, and craftsmen simply cease to exist in one night? Perhaps the answer lies not in heaven or hell, but in something closer to the earth itself, and that, dear listener, is where the story grows darker still. What makes the mystery so enduring is not simply that a village vanished, but that its story refused to die. The tale spread across Europe in fragments, carried by merchants, pilgrims, and monks, who whispered of the cursed hamlet. Each retelling added new layers until the truth and the legend became inseparable. And yet if one listens closely, behind the superstition lies a shadow of something real, something unsettling. In the years that followed, other travelers claimed to pass through the empty village. They spoke of cottages still standing but slowly rotting, roofs collapsing under moss, doors weathered by rain, and always the well at its center, the same well that reeked of iron, standing like a dark heart in the square. Some swore that on moonless nights, voices echoed from its depths, a woman crying, a child calling for his mother. Few dared to draw water, and those who did said the bucket returned heavier than it should, as though something clung to it beneath the surface. Some dropped coins for luck, but the coins were never heard striking the bottom. The well, it seemed, had no end. Scholars have since tried to unravel the disappearance. One theory suggests an outbreak of plague, swift and merciless. In 1349, the Black Death tore through Europe, leaving towns and villages empty in its wake. Could this be one of them? The evidence, however, resists. Villages consumed by plague left behind bodies, cartloads of the dead, graves hurriedly dug. Yet here no corpses were ever reported. The silence of the abandoned home suggests not death, but flight. And still, why would an entire population leave their food, their animals, their very belongings? What could drive them out with such haste that even a child's doll lay forgotten in the dust? Others turn to the earth itself for answers. Northern Germany lies on fault lines of unstable soil and shifting rivers. Perhaps the ground gave way, a sinkhole swallowing families into the depths, leaving houses eerily intact above. A terrifying image, but again, no such crater was ever recorded. And if the earth had consumed them, would it not have taken their homes as well? The theory fails to close the wound of uncertainty. Then there are the darker suggestions, those that speak less of nature, more of pact and punishment. The monastery chronicler who first recorded the event noted an unusual phrase. The villagers turned their faces from God. Did he mean idolatry? Pagan rites? Some whispered of midnight gatherings at the oak tree beyond the fields, where fires burned and chants rose into the night. To peasants of neighboring towns, it was enough to brand them cursed. To later storytellers, it was the seed of damnation, that the villagers as one had walked willingly into the woods to join their shadowy master. The fact that no bones were ever found only fueled the suspicion that they were claimed body and soul. And yet another possibility exists, more haunting in its simplicity. Perhaps the village was never there at all. Some historians argue that the account was a cautionary tale invented by monks, meant to frighten Christians into obedience, a phantom village erased by God as punishment. If so, then the story succeeded. For centuries, peasants avoided the area, calling it the Hollow Place. Even when new settlements rose nearby, they built their churches facing away from that land, as if unwilling to acknowledge what once stood there. Whether real or imagined, the fear was real enough to shape the map. But for those who have walked the ground, there remains something undeniable. The site of the village still exists, fields scattered with blackened stones, fragments of pottery unearthed by farmers' plows, a lone hollow in the earth where the well once stood. Modern archaeologists have searched, but what they found raised more questions than answers. Scattered foundations suggest cottages once stood, yes, but no signs of struggle, no layers of ash, no graves. A place where people lived, but never seemed to die. The locals even today avoid speaking of it after dark. They say that sometimes, when the mist rolls in from the river, shapes appear in the fields, shadows of houses that no longer exist. A light in a window, a figure moving behind a door. Travelers who dare to camp nearby wake in the night to the sound of bells, faint and hollow, though no church has stood there for centuries. And some whisper that if you stand too close to where the well once gaped, you will hear your own name rising from below, spoken in a voice you almost recognize. And so the village lingers, half in history, half in myth. Perhaps it was plague. Perhaps famine drove them away. Perhaps war or bandits took them. Or perhaps the monks spun a story to frighten the faithful. Or perhaps, in the long silence of medieval Europe, something darker prowled the forests and claimed them all. We may never know. What remains is the unsettling truth that in a world where records fade and stones crumble, entire communities can be swallowed by time itself, leaving only questions. The medieval village that disappeared overnight reminds us that history is not only kings and battles, it is also absences, silences, the unexplained gaps where human lives once flourished. And perhaps that is why this story endures, because it speaks to our deepest fear, that everything we build, everything we know, could vanish in a single night. So what do you think happened there? Was it God's wrath, a natural disaster, or something more sinister that cannot be named? The answer, if it exists at all, lies buried beneath centuries of earth and shadow, and maybe, just maybe, it is better left that way. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark corners of the past, remember to like, share, and subscribe. More mysteries from the medieval world await, and each may be stranger than the last.